Good morning, Santa Cruz River Research Days 2026. Thank you all for being here. I didn't learn my lesson from yesterday to pause for applause, but welcome back to the second of 3 days. My name is Luke Cole, and I am with Sonoran Institute. I direct our Santa Cruz River program. This is our annual opportunity, or one of our annual opportunities, to bring together this incredible community throughout the Santa Cruz River Valley and throughout the country and binationally with our folks who are tuning in over Zoom. The purpose of this conference is to give voice and opportunity to our partners who work tirelessly, our creatives, our community organizers, to continue to enhance the gem that is the Santa Cruz River. We are very lucky today to have the Tucson Language Justice Collective here doing real-time interpretation. I also want to acknowledge our sponsors. We are sponsored by the Water Infrastructure and Finance Authority of Arizona, Tucson Electric Power, and Cox Communications, with added and special funding support from Pima County Regional Flood Control District, Tucson Water, and the Friends of the Santa Cruz River. We also want to give a special thank you to Tucson Water for providing the room and the field trip tomorrow with a bunch of these incredible prickly pear seltzers. These are in the coolers over here on the side of the room. We will be refreshing these throughout the day. Do your best to drink these up. We also got pastries provided from Rosebud Bakery out by 5 Points, which are, from what I hear, incredible, and coffee from Best Coffee in Tucson 2025 from Coffee Times. So use those resources. They will fuel you and they will keep you full and happy. Additionally, for lunch today, we have an order coming in from Taqueria Juanitos. So there will be a full array of omnivorous, vegan, vegetarian options available to you in the room for lunch. A little perk for the in the room folks. Sorry, Zoomers, but you can run to your fridge whenever you want to. I also want to thank our steering committee, which is made up of Sonoran Institute's Santa Cruz River program staff. That includes myself, Alex Corral over here, Claire Zugmeyer in the back, as well as Michael Bogan right over here, Ben Lomeli, who's here in the back, and Tony Palmer right here, second to last row. Thank you all for your tireless work. They reviewed all of the abstracts and concepts and structures that goes into forming research days. So it is not an easy job, and we are all benefiting from the work collectively of the steering committee. We also want to acknowledge the support and talents of the Tucson Language Justice Collective in the back, as well as Christian and Jake, who are running our AV throughout the workshop. So thank you all very much. So let's remind ourselves what we're doing here, where we are, what this means. We are on the lands of the Atam and the Pascoyaqui and their many predecessors and neighbors, and are honored to be able to work within, do our very best to steward and cherish this land and do all we can to honor and acknowledge the indigenous tribal knowledge that they have passed to us. Here at Santa Cruz River Research Days this year, our theme is a watershed of protection. One more, please. And we do this within the Colorado River Basin. We are within this watershed. We're at the far-flung edges of it, but we are within the Colorado River watershed where 40 million people live. There are millions of acres of farmland here. All of the vegetables that we are having, especially in the winter, are coming from the Yuma Valley, which is within the which is in the Colorado River watershed. We have within here the US, Mexico, as well as sovereign and recognized tribal nations, 21 high biodiversity areas, and a huge, huge economy. Sonoran Institute, for our part, has been working within the Colorado River Basin since 1990. So we're in our 36th year. And our mission, as you will see today, is to connect people and communities to the natural resources that nourish and sustain them. We have 4 programs that we operate within Sonoran Institute. We have our program in the Colorado River Delta, where we have about 35 staff who are down there actively working with our tribal partners, doing youth and family education, dredging canals to try to make sure that when flows from the Colorado River are released and accessible, that those flows go as far as they can towards reconnecting the Colorado River, again, with the Gulf of California. We have our Santa Cruz River program, which you're all already invested in. Our Growing Water Smart program specifically works with municipalities to help them collectively understand today's water and land use challenges and give them the tools to be forward-thinking to get themselves into a water and land use secure future. That program is within Colorado, Arizona, recently along the US-Mexico border, and in California. And lastly, our One Basin program works to help build tribal capacity where it is all too often overlooked and lacking. Collectively, our work is to bring communities together. You saw the team that within the Santa Cruz River program. It's 3 of us, and we work to establish and build community, as well as to convene people like we're doing today. It's in getting these many minds and perspectives all working and collaborating together that we can truly affect change and ensure that that change is sustained and amplified into the future. And all in the name of conservation. There's work being done, again, to preserve very ecologically, culturally, indigenously sensitive areas. And I know, indigenous, and I got on an adverb roll. And all of this is bringing back these very sensitive and in some cases long lost species. So we celebrate that. And our work as a Santa Cruz River program looks at the entirety of the Santa Cruz River, from where it begins in Arizona, goes into Mexico, and then again comes back into the US, flowing from Ambos, Nogales, northward toward and past Tucson. All right, that is it for the start. So now we are grounded, we understand where we are and what the theme of research days is. I feel like there was some slides. Okay. So yesterday we had a keynote presentation from Supervisor Andres Cano and Pima County Conservation Lands and Resources Director Chris Gade about the 25th anniversary of the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. It speaks to these long celebrated, effective policies and research initiatives that are doing what I discussed before. They are strengthening these resources and pointing us toward a future where the Sonoran Desert and the Santa Cruz River corridor are protected, respected, restored. Today, we are going to look at the headwaters of the Santa Cruz River to start the day off. So we have a special session that we've titled Conservation and Restoration in the San Rafael Valley. So this will be looking at those headwaters, this very sensitive, rare, beautiful part of the state and of this larger watershed. And to start that off, we're going to bring up Carol Bonchalk from the Friends of the San Rafael Valley, and Carol will be talking about the valley history and management. So Carol, come on up.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share with those of you here today and virtual. I haven't done this in 20 years, so this is, I'm getting back into this. I'm one of these retirees who has decided to get involved in a project and is now having to restart these activities. So if there's anyone here who has never been to the San Rafael Valley, my words to you are, please get there now. And the valley, as was just said by Cole, is actually the headwaters of the Santa Cruz River. It's one of the last intact short grass prairies, and the viewshed is priceless at the moment. But if you wait a year, part of that viewshed is going to be the border wall. So there is a reason to make your trip to the San Rafael as quickly as possible. The San Rafael lies within its own little watershed. It's called the San Rafael Basin. It's about 172 square miles, and it basically starts at the Patagonia, at the crest of the Patagonia Mountains, and on the west side or the east side of it. It's got the Canelo Hills that feed it, and it's also got the Huachuca Mountains that feed the water. So that all of the washes, the draws that we have, the creeks, et cetera, that flows all into the Santa Cruz River, which of course then goes down through the central part of the San Rafael Valley and ultimately makes its way into Mexico. And as everybody knows, it comes back around into Nogales area. Cattle ranching has been really the predominant activity. Okay. Cattle ranching has been the prominent activity in the San Rafael Valley for approximately 200 years. While large-scale capital operations didn't begin until the 1883, the cattle were in the valley much earlier. Came along with, you had the indigenous, the Native Americans that were there. They were followed by the Spanish explorers. And then the Mexican families moved upward into that area because there was the San Rafael land grant was created in 1822. Those ranchers found it difficult to stay there because of the Apache raids. And so during the 1840s, most of those individuals moved back into the Santa Cruz, Mexico area, abandoning a good part of the San Rafael land grant. From the time of the Gadsden Purchase, which was in 1854, up to the 1890s, the San Rafael Valley went through some significant changes. As a result of this Gadsden, yeah, I'm having your problem, Luke. Gadsden Purchase, the San Rafael land grant became part of the United States. The U.S. Army began campaigns to target the Apaches at that point and make it safer for the residents in the valley. Eastern investors showed up, and they were interested in both mining and cattle ranching. And finally, the 1862 Homestead Act was created and opened up the land to homesteaders. During that time, the homesteaders and some squatters actually moved into the valley, and they selected areas that were on the perimeter of the land grant. So you had the 17,000 acres of land grant, and all of the rest of those homesteaders and squatters were on the outer edges of that. Then in 1883, you have Colin Cameron, who comes in from Pennsylvania. He comes from a wealthy, very connected family. And he has a group of investors who are interested in purchasing the San Rafael land grant. He does that, and they establish for the first time the San Rafael Cattle and Land Company. Now, Cameron wanted to be a big soul, and so he looked at the paperwork, and the paperwork said 17,000 acres, but he chose to look at the Spanish interpretation and wanted to interpret it as it being, instead of 4 square leagues, which is what was 17,000 acres, he interpreted it as 4 leagues square, which made it 152,000 acres. Easy way to get it. That, as a result of that, he claims the land. Needless, he's now fighting with the homesteaders and the squatters. Now, some of the squatters who were on the southern part of his property there, they gave in because they really didn't have a legitimate reason for being there. They did not get a homestead. But for the next 17 years, the homesteaders and Colin Cameron were in a nasty battle. In part, it resulted in, although it was never proven, in his house burning down in 1899. But by 1900, the case finally made its way to the US Supreme Court. And at that time, the Supreme Court said, no, Colin Cameron, you do not have 152 acres. It is 4 square, you have 17,000 acres. And all the homesteaders were allowed to keep their homesteads. That settlement was one that produced a lot of problems for him with his investors. They were accustomed to having the profits coming in from a 152,000 acre ranch because he did move his cattle everywhere. And so they decided that they wanted to have the property sold. So in 1903, Colonel William Green, who was not really a colonel, it was just the things of buying and putting your name fancy with colonel on it. I understand he never spent a day in any military of any kind. He buys the ranch. He pays $1 million for the property, which is the 17,000 acres plus another 3,000 plus that Colin Cameron had purchased legitimately, I guess you would say, off of the squatters. And he continues with the ranching as it had been. However, Colonel Green also he did own other cattle ranches in the Arizona area, particularly over in Hereford. But he also was big in Mexico. He owned the Cananea Cattle Company and the Cananea Mine. So what happened is the house and everything else that was there on the property was no longer a family home. It was a business opportunity. And so the ranch was basically taken over and run by local individuals in the area. Colonel Green's focus was in Mexico. I just missed something. Wait a minute. Okay. So by the mid 1940s, most of the land in the valley was actually owned by only 6 major ranches. I will note that right now it's really owned by 3 major ranches. There are several areas that are not, and we'll talk about that later when we mention the map here. Those 6 major ranches, some of them were larger ranchers, such as the Green one that was owned by local families in that regard because he did treat it as a family ranch, even though his family did not live there at the time. Some of them were owned by investors. The investors were smart. They basically hired people who were local ranchers to run the business for them. Those local families were not interested in building empires, and so the ranching was their livelihood, and they showed it in their approach to the land. Conservation ranching actually began at that point. In 1958, Colonel Green's daughter, Florence, she inherits the San Rafael Ranch. She's a woman who absolutely loves ranching. She loved the cattle, the cowboys, anything about ranch life. And what was interesting is that she was a follower of Rachel Carson. So she was very, very much into an environmental approach to the valley's land. Interesting parts of her life is that she changed from having registered cattle to commercial cattle because there was less demand on the land. She would never use pesticides or spraying of any kind. Her theory was, if we leave them go, we have a large enough hawk formation in the valley, and the hawks will take care of all of the grasshoppers. It worked. Excuse me. She also was very much into, as I said, the land and the water, and she went around on her own through the ranch, and she created all the various kind of water catchments and erosion dikes to save the lands again. In the 1970s, the landowners that were there in residence decided to create a group called the San Rafael Valley Association. They listed, now remember, this is 1970, and this is a group of individuals who live in a valley, very much not a part of the rest of the world, because that's the way they wanted it to be. They decided that their main mission and goal was to maintain and protect and preserve all natural forms of vegetation and wildlife, to prevent, control, and eliminate all forms of environmental pollution, to establish, maintain, and preserve nature's ecological balance. That's some pretty heavy words for that time frame. Every rancher had his or her own ideas on how to run his or her ranch, but when something was going to affect the valley as a whole, they got together to find one solution. And some of them are a little crazy, but they're examples. Like, you want electric power at your ranch? Okay, but you're not putting any power poles through the county. You're going to have it buried underground and pay for it. And if you've ever been in the valley, most people assume that, in fact, that those people are all on the grid or not on the grid. They all have solar power. No, the upper part of the valley is completely power, but it's all underground. In addition, there was no commercial signage allowed in the valley. We don't need all those tourisms. We don't need tourists. They're going to provide us with environmental pollution. So no, you can't put signs up in the valley. But some of their decisions were interesting because it impacted not only them, but their Mexican neighbors to the south. When there were drought years, instead of worrying about just their own property, they would make sure that there was enough water that was going to go through the Santa Cruz River so that it would not only help them on their ranches, but some would still flow into Mexico for their neighboring Mexican ranchers. Okay. The San Rafael Valley, in the fall of 1994, they got a framework that they had asked the Sonoran Institute to actually come down to the valley and create a framework. That framework was completed, and within a year of it dying, Florence Green dies, and her family finds themselves in a situation where they have to sell the ranch. They wanted to assure, they spent the next 4 years assuring that that ranch, when it was sold, met all the requirements and priorities that were in that framework that they came up with Sonoran Institute for it to actually be sold. When it was sold, a conservation easement was put on the entire ranch. 17,000 acres of that is the land grant. It's now owned again by a private individual who does conservation ranching. And the second part of the property is the San Rafael State Park. The San Rafael State Natural Area, as it is formally called, was there. It was created in 1999. It has basically sat vacant for the last 26 years. What we've tried to do is change that. The Friends of the San Rafael organization has come along, and we're working with the state parks at this point. Before I get into that a bit, before I forget this, the conservation easement, just so for your information, this is pretty much the San Rafael Valley. Like I said, I'm out of this. So this is, for the most part, the San Rafael Valley. Anything you see in blue, that is under conservation easement at this point in time. This portion down here, there's a section of it that will probably be under a conservation easement in the not too distant future. The rest of it is private De La Osa families. They have their family church, cemetery, et cetera there. And then you have that small part here, the small part here. This piece up here is the big problem child as far as the conservation easements go. And that is because it's owned, it was bought in 2012 by Stan Kroenke. And if anybody knows him, he is now in 2026 considered the #1 landowner in the United States with 2.7 million acres of ranch land. He's been approached by various land trusts, et cetera, to place it on a conservation easement, but to date he has not. And he has this whole land. When you look at this, we're pretty secure for the San Rafael Valley from the standpoint of the conservation easements protected from development. What we're not seeing at this point is the ability to protect it in other ways. Right now, the border wall is going across here. And we really have never had a lot of experience with what is the water level. I mean, the water level in the valley sometimes is just only 17 feet deep, but they're draining water. There's problems with invasive species, et cetera. And these all affect, needless to say, the Santa Cruz River, which at this point has not had any attention for years, other than the ranchers. And as you all, I know some of the people in the room will say that's not good attention, but it is better than most in there. So what I'm trying to encourage, and I encourage you to do, is although the state park, the natural area, which is this area right here, the 3,500 acres, it has 2 miles of the Santa Cruz River that run through it. It's also a grasslands that's open. State Parks has no money in order to open it or do anything, but they have been recently willing to work with organizations, 2 of who are going to be following me, to do different projects on the land if you happen to have funding. Now, I know that's usually a big challenge, but one key we have at this point is the Sentinel landscape. If you're not familiar with that, Fort Huachuca Sentinel landscape runs through the county, or the San Rafael Valley. And in fact, they have a great deal of funding source. They've actually helped with one of the conservation easements in the past, and they do a lot of others. So what I would like to do, as my time is getting short, is encourage you to please start thinking with your organizations about doing some work in the San Rafael Valley. As the Friends group, we'll be more than willing to help you with any work you have that you want to do. If you need volunteers, we've been able to do that. If you need help getting through the paperwork at the state parks, or if you just want a tour to find out what is the San Rafael State Natural Area, you can contact us at Friends of the San Rafael Valley, it's all one word, at gmail.com. Thank you. Does anybody have questions? Yours.
We have time for one question as we're setting up for the next presentation. The question was, who started the conservation effort? Florence Green Sharp. Carol, thank you. Great job. Will you stick around in case people have further questions? Okay, we'll be going into a break in maybe half an hour or so. Thank you, Carol. Okay, well, next up, we have a virtual presentation. This will be coming in from Brian Hickerson from the Arizona Game and Fish Department. And Brian will be talking about the Sharp Spring Gila top minnow. Brian, are we coming through okay for you?
Yep, I got you. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Hickerson. I'm the Gila River Basin Native Fish Coordinator for the Arizona Game and Fish Department. And, Carol did a great job giving the history, the landscape level view of the San Rafael Valley. I'm going to pivot quite a bit to sort of this hyper-focused, smaller project just on a single portion of the valley. But, hopefully it'll tie into what Carol presented in that this is one of our best opportunities we've had, in my world as a native fish world, but to do some native fish work in the San Rafael Valley, which, contributes to the greater Santa Cruz as a whole. So, Carol did a great job of introducing folks to the San Rafael Valley. I wish I had a better map of where Sharp Springs is relative to that, but essentially, this is a series of cienega type pools within a stream channel. And this is located about 3/4 mile east of the Santa Cruz River and about 1.5 miles north of the international border. That road you see in the top left of this map is coming off Duquesne Road, kind of the intersection of that San Rafael Valley Road. If folks have ever been in the area, you might have seen some cottonwood trees to the south, and that's Sharp Springs. It has about 15 of those Cienega type pools. I've kind of highlighted them in blue here, so you can see they're sort of spatially clustered in parts and isolated from one another in other places. But historically, this was home to a fish called Gila topminnow, which is endangered. Many of you might have heard of it. The Sonoran Institute does quite a bit of work with them in the Santa Cruz itself. But importantly, this is what we call a relic population, meaning that these topminnow have persisted in Sharp Spring, before human or European colonization. So that makes it relatively important, as we only have currently like a dozen to 15, depending on how you want to group them on the landscape. But in 1979, Western mosquito fish, which is a non-native fish native to sort of the East Slope Mississippi drainage of the United States, were first detected in Sharp Spring. We think those mosquito fish showed up because potentially a public health department trying to do a good thing, controlling mosquitoes and disease from those mosquito larvae with sort of a natural biocontrol, not knowing that Gila topminnow are already there and do that job really well. So Western mosquito fish have quite a bit of impact on Gila topminnow, even though they look about the same. They're both in the guppy family, but Western mosquito fish tend to prey upon the young of Gila topminnow. They get slightly larger and they outcompete them. So we have quite a bit of cases where over time, Western mosquito fish will completely eradicate the topminnow populations. So, after the discovery of Western mosquito fish in Sharp Springs, that's a picture in the 90s here, there was consistent monitoring the 80s and 90s, but it basically documented a fairly rapid decline in the Gila topminnow population among most of those pools. So biologists then had the foresight to take some of those topminnow out and establish replicate populations other places in the landscape. So should and when we lose Gila topminnow from Sharp Spring, we had representatives of that genetic lineage, which is a distinct management unit, on the landscape should we ever have the opportunity to repopulate them. And that's basically what happened. The last Gila topminnow was detected in 2001 in Sharp Spring. This is a photo from about that time. It was exclusively Western mosquito fish. For fish managers, though, when we look at sort of a complex Cienega wetland thing like this, we think about a species like Western mosquito fish, which is a live-bearing species, guppy, super prolific. Fixing that problem is actually really hard. Getting rid of all those fish is a daunting task. We don't have a ton of tools. Their effectiveness is complicated by the Cienega habitat. And so for a long time, people didn't have a good solution to fix this problem. The first real attempt to fix this was back in 2013. Some folks thought maybe we can use pumps to drain some of these pools individually. If we dry up the pools, we can eradicate Western mosquito fish, the water levels will return. But there's such strong recharge from the aquifer, and these are like pretty much groundwater supported Cienega pools, that they could never get it dry enough, and Western mosquito fish still persisted even in, you can see this muddy water on the left. And this is not a no impact strategy, so they gave it up after trying a pool or two as a, an attempt, but not a very successful attempt. But then we didn't have a lot of good ideas or support for ideas that we thought would work for quite a while, until about 2021. We approached state parks, and we'd had conversations before about potentially using a pesticide, basically a pesticide for fish called rotenone, to see if we could eradicate the Western mosquito fish to get it ready to put Gila topminnow back. But these are some pictures of habitat at the time when we're measuring pool volumes and stuff to calculate treatment rates and determine feasibility. And rotenone is most often applied in ponds and reservoirs or in flowing streams, and we couldn't really find any test cases of when people are applying it to cienegas or wetlands. We had a lot of uncertainty. Its effectiveness is limited by the amount of organic material in the water. As you can see here, there's quite a bit. So even that seemed quite challenging to us. So we spent almost 2 years in the planning of that treatment. And we were finally able to implement a rotenone treatment in June of 2022. We had 2 treatments back to back, about 2 weeks apart. And we were able to confirm that we successfully eradicated Western mosquito fish. Following the second of those, we did some intensive trapping in late June and early July of 2022. And it worked. We did it. And so in mid-July of 2022, we were able to return Sharp Springs Gila top minnow from those replicate populations that we established many, many years ago back into Sharp Springs. So this is really cool to be able to fix the problem, return them to their historical habitat from those replicate populations, you know, kind of everything you're hoping for opportunity-wise from native fish conservation. And you can see those numbers in the top right. We started with about 670 fish from 3 donor populations around the state. We followed that up with stockings of almost 1,000 fish in 2023 and 2024, in part to make sure we're getting, you know, the best genetic diversity, all the alleles still in the landscape back in this historical site. So I wish my presentation ended and we just said, yep, it worked, it's great, but that's not what happened. So we thought Western mosquito fish, this is the limiting factor. We know it's historical habitat, we shouldn't have any problems, but when we returned to do monitoring, you know, usually late August, early September, when populations at their highest, we weren't seeing what we normally see with top minnow populations after stocking, which is increase in numbers, young a year, increasing distribution. What we're seeing is typically top minnow present in fewer pools than we had stocked, and substantially fewer numbers than we had stocked. You know, this is a prolific live bearing species. We normally expect, you know, you stock 500 in May, you can expect, you know, 700, 1,000 in August or September. And we're seeing, you know, 135 in 2022, 2023, only 117 and 1 in 2024. And in 23 and 24, we stocked multiple pools, but we're only finding fish in one pool. So that didn't make a lot of sense to us. You know, we got rid of the thing that we thought was inhibiting top minnow populations. And so then we had to, you know, look at what we were seeing in the landscape and come up with some hypotheses and test them. And one of them is we were noticing some changes to the habitat, you know, based on historical photos and even previous site visits. And one thing we were noticing is we were doing things like we set a minnow trap for 2 hours to monitor these fish, and we were drowning bullfrog tadpoles that are running out of oxygen. And so when we were like, let's deploy some dissolved oxygen loggers and see what does that dissolved oxygen profile look like. So this photo on the right, you can see there's in the water, there's that yellow book, there's a cable, and down there's a little white dot. That's our dissolved oxygen logger, and we deploy it, you know, about 6 to 12 inches below the surface to make sure it stays submerged throughout the summer. In this plot on the left, I'm only showing one of the 2 pools we deployed oxygen loggers in from May of 2024 through September of 2025. And the y-axis is dissolved oxygen on the bottom panel. It's almost essentially 0 the entire summer, 6 to 12 inches deep. I don't know if folks know anything about fish, but they need greater than 0 oxygen in the water. And so those fish that were surviving were probably able to get, you know, the intratube oxygen that's at the boundary layer. That's really hard for us to measure with a device like this. But that's a problem that we didn't used to have in the past. It's such a narrow oxygen profile, which limits the amount of habitat. If you can only breathe in the top 2 inches of water, you know, populations aren't going to thrive. So this was surprising to us, and we had to figure out now, okay, we have a mechanism. It's, you know, mosquito fish are gone. We don't have oxygen. Why aren't we seeing oxygen in this system anymore? That didn't used to be a problem. We mosquito fish up to that treatment in 2022 in many of these pools. And we think it's sort of a synergistic effect of a number of changes on the landscape. So this is a picture, I think, from 2024. This is almost complete duckweed cover. Duckweed's a floating aquatic plant. And it's covering almost the entire surface of these pools. These are 2 of the pools that we've stocked top minnow in that we had the most mosquito fish in before the treatment. And this is a problem for a number of reasons. It's known to inhibit dissolved oxygen. So the 2 ways we get dissolved oxygen in water is sunlight penetrating the water surface and submerging aquatic plants, releasing oxygen. And then also, you know, wind action on the surface of the water, disturbing water and allowing oxygen to sort of dissolve into the water. But duckweed prevents both of those things and can result in these, you know, low to no oxygen environments. But duckweed's been present back in photos to the 90s and all this. So why is this a problem now? So we started looking at some of our historical photos to see what we could glean. And this picture in the top left is about 1992. This is all of the same location. So that guy bending over in the top left is in the same location as this photo in 2002 in the bottom left. And I've drawn a blue circle around the staff gauge that they have out there to measure the water depth. And that staff gauge is in the water in 2002. And then 2023 on the right, that circle is the staff gauge. It's in grass. It's about 2 feet above the water surface. So we're seeing the water depth decrease up to 2 feet in the last 30 years. You'll also notice the pool stops about that staff gauge in 2023, but extended, dozens of meters more past that in 1992. So pool size is decreasing. You'll also notice the vegetation around the edges is changing. There was a wildfire, I believe, in 2020 that burned up quite a few of the bigger riparian gallery trees, but it seems like maybe also soil moisture is changing because we're getting plants like in the picture on the bottom right, that's a lot of sunflower that's encroaching on it, which can't deal with as wet as soils as some of the wetland plants. So, we're seeing the plant community adjacent to these pools changing as water depth changes. And then we wanted to look at this a little wider and say, okay, well, now we're seeing in pictures that these staff gauges are getting out of the water, the pools are getting smaller. So we collected PRISM data, which is this climatological data set that's publicly available at 3-kilometer scale. We used some of their estimated precipitation data, extracted it to the watershed of the San Rafael Valley, and calculated the mean by year. And I think we had data back to 1981 pretty consistently. And so this plot is just through 2023. I haven't updated for the last 2 years, but what we found is there's a decrease of about 6 inches in precipitation from 1981 to 2023. Granted, I think a lot of us are aware that the 80s, 90s were like a particularly anomalously wet period, but that's when most of our monitoring data is from, when population was doing best. So we're comparing it to a wetter time, but we're seeing now it's substantially drier, and we're seeing that change on the landscape, both in terms of how the fish respond and the pool depths. But we've tried to tackle this duckweed issue a little bit. We got together with friends of the San Rafael Valley to do some duckweed removal, which is this sort of like manual work in the middle of the summer in the sun. These are pictures from, I believe, last year, maybe the year before. But, when we were able to get the duckweed off the surface of the pond, it opened up water, allowed potentially for more oxygenation. And when we monitored this last, I think early September in 2025, we only got 55 fish, but importantly, we got them in 3 pools, which we've never gotten them in more than 2 pools. And the last time we got them in 2 pools was 2022. So we're seeing better survival. We're not seeing the population increases we'd like to see, but we at least have here's a short-term option to improve survival in this location. But, we're more about making long-term progress. So I think we're at a place where we need to think of some next steps. And this is potentially where folks watching this presentation might have some suggestions or even contacts or interest in projects like this that are, harder for me and my team of 2 other biologists that are responsible for 2/3 of the state to tackle. But, we need to explore more effective and longer term duckweed control. What we're doing, what the Friends group is doing is working, but, it's physically intensive. They have to go out every couple weeks. It's probably not sustainable for years and years and years. We're going to continue stalking and monitoring these populations to see if they establish, because it's so important, that top minnow and sharp spring, and honestly have such sunk costs in the project at this point. And then ultimately, we might need to consider habitat restoration. There's very few people who are specialists in cienega function because it's such a specific habitat type. But it seems like the cienega, with this decreasing rain falling in the watershed, is changing how it's functioning to a point where it's not great fish habitat anymore. So ultimately that would help, but that requires some expertise that we don't necessarily have on staff, and also funding resources we don't currently have access to. So that's where we're at. We're seeing progress. We have some next steps, but we have more work to do. So with that, I want to thank folks that have contributed to this, particularly Arizona State Parks and Trails, the San Rafael State Natural Area, for supporting this project and helping us initiate some of this work, the Fish and Wildlife Service for contributing, Friends of the San Rafael Valley for doing the hard work to get that duckweed off the surface this last year. Bureau of Reclamation provided funding for a decent amount of this work, and then there's been tons of department staff and volunteers that help with this work. So if I have time for questions, happy to take any. Otherwise, my contact information's on this slide. Happy to answer any questions should you want to reach out later.
Great, Brian, thank you so much. That's a complicated story, well told. So as we're setting up for the next presentation, Brian, we do have a question in the room. I think we can take one, maybe two.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for your time. I'm just wondering how you said it was duckweed that was on top of the pools, how that came about, like, because historically it probably wasn't as prominent of an issue. Did you guys figure that out?
So we see duckweed in pictures back to the 80s, and it's, I don't know if it's a native plant or not, but it is dispersed by ducks. Like it'll stick to their feathers and their feet and stuff. And it's a pretty prolific in the way that it regenerates. So it only takes like a couple pieces and it can regenerate, if it's stuck to a duck. But there's different conditions which can lead to it establishing. And I'm not an aquatic plant expert, so I'm not sure why, but my guess is the lack of, like, there used to be occasional flow through the system. That doesn't happen anymore. That's probably not helping. Hopefully that answered your question.
Hi, Brian. I have a silly question. I do environmental education along the Santa Cruz River, and sing the praises of the Gila topminnow to many a child, but never stop to ask the question or think about the question, why do we want, aside from the fact that it is the native fish, what are the benefits to the river ecosystem, the riparian ecosystem that the Gila topminnow can offer that the mosquito fish cannot?
Yeah. So the question specifically, like, what, other than being native and listed as endangered, what is the advantage of having a topminnow over a mosquito fish? I think that's the question. That's a hard one for me to answer because I'm so close to it. This is my life's work that, my value is that, I personally care about these species, but it is harder to make an argument to the broader public for, if our best argument is, Gila topminnow can provide vector control, controlling mosquito larvae, reducing the spread of disease, but Western mosquito fish are good at that too. So it's really a values question. Do you value having a native fish on the landscape or a non-native fish? So it's, I think you nailed that. One of the hardest parts of our work is communicating why that's important, and ultimately it's a value. Some people may choose not to value a native species over a non-native species, and that's, one of the most difficult things in our work to work through or communicate, I guess.
Great. Brian, thank you so much. Great questions. Appreciate you being here.
Yep, absolutely.
Next up, we have Emily Burns and Eamon Harrity from Sky Island Alliance, who will be talking about a wildlife camera study. Welcome them up.
Great. Thank you, Luke. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I am not excellent at keeping the microphone close to my mouth, so please, if I let it fall, let me know. Just shout at me. Tell me you can't hear me. So I work with Sky Island Alliance, which I think there was in addition to being a really wet time of an epic, the 1990s were a popular time to start nonprofits. Sky Island is celebrating their 35th anniversary, Sonoran Institute 36th, Wildlands Network 35th. There's like this theme of the 1990s, early 1990s for starting environmental nonprofits. We good to go? Yep. Great. I am here to talk to you about wildlife and the border wall. Carol gave a great introduction to the San Rafael and one of the threats that is coming presently across the San Rafael is the border wall. I will be touching on parts of the Santa Cruz River, both in the San Rafael and also as it comes back to the United States in Nogales area. But just as a quick introduction, this project is long running and multifaceted with support from private individuals, nonprofits, institutions, a lot of permitting agencies, and tons of volunteers, some of whom are in the room. Richard Quaid has been a huge help over the years, checking lots and lots of cameras with us. So thank you, Richard. And really, this is impossible to do without the help of volunteers and supporters. I don't think I need to explain to the room that we live in a very, very special place. The Sky Islands, the Madrean Sky Islands, southeastern Arizona, southwestern New Mexico, northern Sonora, northern Chihuahua, our very own Four Corners. It's one of the most biologically diverse places in North America. It's the confluence of biogeographic regions like the Sonoran Desert, the Chihuahuan Desert, the Sierra Madres, the Rocky Mountains. They all converge here. We're the only place in the world where black bears and jaguars share the same path. For birders, we're the place of elegant trogons and American robins, bald eagles and gray hawks. For mammalian people, antelope and ocelot. We have aspen and saguaro. We are some of the highest diversity of native bee species in the world. I mean, this is one of the most special places around. But it also lies on the border. And as we're seeing over the past 30 years, the border has become increasingly militarized, increasingly hardened, as they say. Basically, the structures and the infrastructure at the border has gone from barbed wire fences mainly aimed at controlling or keeping cows in their pastures to structures that look like this and expand for many, many miles. And because of some of the federal law waivers and some of the context of the early 2000s, there's no impact assessments done. There's no application of an Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, Indigenous and Cultural Heritage Protection Acts. None of that applies. So the wall is built really quickly and without consideration for the impacts. So as an organization, we have been asking, what does it mean to cross a landscape with a barrier like this? This is the current, already out of date map of infrastructure along the border, where red represents pedestrian wall, 18 to 30 feet tall. Blue represents a vehicle barrier, and in those few little gaps, there was nothing but barbed wire. However, already San Rafael Valley is halfway closed. Patagonia's, they're starting 2 walls, parallel walls. Nogales, they've started 2 walls. The Tohono O'odham Nation is listed as a place where they want to build wall, despite the tribe insistence of no wall. Anyway, basically the entire US-Mexico border is going to be walled if they get their way. And what does that mean for animals? This is the Santa Cruz River as it comes back from Sonora into Arizona near Nogales. And you can see this was taken last week. They've already, and I think Claire confirmed that they've basically finished. This is them building the wall across the river channel. Pretty big, significant influence, right? With gaps the size of your hand, 4 inches. How many people have pets at home that could get through a 4-inch gap? Cats, maybe, smaller dogs, kid, but your huskies, your labs, definitely not. So basically, how do animals navigate these types of infrastructure? We have been using wildlife cameras, which are motion activated, detect motion. We've got cameras distributed across about 140 miles of the US-Mexico border. Some of them are immediately adjacent to the wall, and those are what we'll be talking about today. Some are a little bit farther from the wall. And there, I think of them as taking the pulse of the landscape. They've been on the ground since 2020, 6 years. And they're long-term monitoring how populations change as infrastructure changes. For today, I will focus on 20 terrestrial species that are about the size, about 2 pounds or 1 kilogram and larger. As we reason, these are the species most likely hindered by the 4-inch gaps in the border wall. But they range from the ringtail down, not on this map, there is no ringtail, but skunks, jackrabbits, all the way on up to American black bears. And then anyone know what this little animal in the middle that looks kind of like a soot sprite, if anyone watches Studio Ghibli? Anyone know what this animal is? No, but it's similar, I guess. Here's the badger down here with the big white striping. That's the North American porcupine. It's another one of these kind of enigmatic species that actually has a fairly robust population in the San Rafael Valley. We would never have known, well, people have known, but cameras have really helped us understand that these porcupines are much wider spread than we thought. But we asked the question of what these animals do when they encounter border walls. And the first question, of course, was vehicle barrier. So this is in the San Rafael Valley. Does not look like this anymore, unfortunately. But you can see it's a relatively permeable structure. It was designed, it was put in 2005, 2006 to stop vehicles, but not really intended to stop pedestrian traffic. And really, animals navigate it pretty easily. In this footage, they've already ducked under the vehicle barrier and are just going under that barbed wire fence from Arizona to Sonora. I was just in this drainage yesterday. I don't want to talk about it, it's really sad, but the trees are gone, the drainage is completely changed, and they're about to build a border wall. So animals like this will not be crossing. But all across the board, from skunks to black bears, we're finding that when animals encounter vehicle barriers, they're crossing about 50% of the interactions, which translates, or which means that it's relatively easy for this species to find their way through the structure to move as they might need to across the US-Mexico border. The border wall is a bit different. Some animals, like this bobcat, can find their way through and get through those 4-inch spaces. But other cats and other animals cannot. Naturally want to move, naturally need to move, blocked by the border wall. And if we look at the crossing rates for these species, where this is a fun graphic designed by Frontiera, we see that most of these larger animals, like the deer, the mountain lion, the bears, are totally stopped. Some animals like coyotes, very few, sort of the slender teenagers can get through. Javelina, we have had a couple successful crossings, but we have also seen individuals get stuck and die in the border wall. So that's basically a full stop for javelina. Some of the smaller animals like raccoons and bobcats are crossing, skunks, gray foxes, rabbits, and jackrabbits are crossing, but these larger animals are largely blocked. Do folks think there was any accommodation for wildlife in the border wall? Did they think, well, you know what? We've built 1,000 miles of this stuff. We should probably have some openings for wildlife. Do you think that was considered? A lot of head shaking? Okay. A little bit more pessimistic than you need to be. There are actually small wildlife openings. And we'll give bonus points to anyone who can see the opening in this photo. There it is. There it is. It's the size of a piece of binder paper. It's 8 inches wide by 11 inches tall. That is all they're willing to give animals. It's smaller, it's almost like the size of that bear's foot. So this bear is obviously not gonna make it through. However, they do work. We were quite surprised over the course of the study. We found that they benefit. Anyone recognize this animal on the right? It's a gray fox, awesome. We have our javelina, the javelina traffic jams, where the whole family troops cross north and south, but they have to cross one at a time, so it takes quite some time for the whole family group to move across. We see coyotes, and most surprisingly, pretty special, right? This is a female mountain lion. We watched her grow up, or her kittens grow up to be full adults, and the family dispersed, and We haven't seen her in a little while, but last detection we did have, she was pregnant again. So it does provide some hope, right? That animals as big as a mountain lion can get through. However, it's also stressful. She's at her physical limit. She has to really, really work to get through this opening. And we found, I don't have it on the next slide like I thought I did. Male mountain lions cannot fit. Adult males are too broad. They cannot get through these openings. But they do provide some relief. And so if we compare the crossing rates, where crossing rates is just, if we had 10 encounters and in 5 the animal got through, that would be a 50% crossing rate. It's a pretty simple metric, but it gives you an idea of the permeability. If we compare that to regular border wall, pay attention to the changes, particularly with mountain lions and javelina. Crossing rates improve dramatically with the presence of these wildlife openings to nearly 40% for both of those species. Coyotes are crossing regularly. Badgers, which cross really irregularly through the border wall, are a bit easier for them to cross, but it still doesn't help the larger species. And importantly, in over 6,500 days of camera monitoring, where each camera day is just, if we have 5 cameras out for 10 days, that's 50 camera days. So in 65,000 days, we've never seen humans try to cross. So these aren't a threat. They're a tool for wildlife. We just need more of them. Here's a photo of a big male mountain lion, and this doesn't see it trying to get through, but we have videos of these individuals trying and failing to fit through. So it's filtering not just species, but individuals as well. And you would think, if these are so small and no threat to people, for no threat to the security, that there would be more of them. But there are 40 of them, roughly, from Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge out in the west, all the way across to the New Mexico border, 40 or 45 of them. So not very many. In the new projects, partially based on our work, they've agreed to put in as many as 2 per mile, which is better than nothing, but still woefully short of what we would need. Not the only option. This is a solution we've found just kind of incidentally as we've been monitoring to the wall, that there's variation in the spacing, not just 4 inches. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 5.5, just construction anomalies. And we've found that as soon as you give animals an extra 1.5 inches, crossing rates for javelina, coyote, and bobcats increase dramatically, and they're very similar to the small wildlife openings. We proposed this to DHS as a cost-saving measure, increase the spacing from 4 inches to 5.5. Animals across the entire border would have easier access to move. What do you think they said? A lot of chuckles. They basically said, we conferred with our tactical team and that's impossible. And I think this is a really important point that extends beyond the border. The standard of evidence that's required for protecting species, protecting the land is incredibly high. The standard of evidence for destroying or not protecting is incredibly low. And I think that disparity is a huge challenge that we need to address. And all of this is relevant because border wall projects are proliferating around the world and in the US. I mentioned double walls. They're starting to build 2 parallel walls in many places, which means a whole different complication for wildlife. They're building river walls in Texas. They are spending $47 billion, which is the largest public funded works project in the history of the United States on the border. So we are about to see incredible changes. And I just want to provide the context, right? They use people as justification. We are being invaded. This is the San Rafael Valley, where our cameras have been since 2020. And how many deer do we see per person? 44 times more deer than people per month. Per month, we see 5 people across our cameras on the borderlands. 5 people a month, and half of those are Border Patrol. So maybe a couple people a month are crossing, moving through the borderlands. Do we really need to be spending $47 billion to stop those folks? And the final point, it was brought up by Carol, border walls are thirsty. They require lots and lots of water to build. In 2020, there were estimates from monitoring wells that they were taking 700,000 gallons a day to build the wall. They have 6 current wells operating a full 24/7 in the San Rafael Valley. That is going to affect the water table. And finally, for context, what does it mean? Bear populations in Sonora are endangered. Lots of evidence that these are connected and supported by animals from Arizona and New Mexico, crossing a permeable border. As we build walls across the entire border, that connectivity goes away. Populations in Sonora are less supported, more and more vulnerable to stochastic events like fire, disease. That population becomes less sustainable. Similar situations play out with pronghorn and peninsular bighorn sheep in the western United States. This wall will have long and real impacts. The wall is meant to divide. I want to end you with just an element of hope that I find that in the borderlands restoration community, there's a lot of optimism and a lot of collaboration, and we're trying to find ways to work together despite the wall's best efforts. Thank you.
Eamon, thank you. It's got to be a question. Is that yeah.
I have two, but I'll just ask one. I guess the saddest part for me is thinking that once the wall is in place, even if we get favorable executive changes in the future, that it's unlikely this wall is going to be coming down anytime soon. So I guess I'm wondering if conditions do become more favorable, what would you like to see change in terms of access for wildlife? What are the possibilities that you see there?
That's a really great question. The question is, how could we change the wall with more favorable conditions? You're right, the wall is unlikely to come down. Infrastructure lasts for a long time. However, in our region and across the whole borderlands, they have to put in gates to allow floodwaters to move. And there are literally hundreds of these gates in our region because every large drainage has a gate that they have to open when a flood comes through because the wall gets knocked down every year when they don't. When we have more favorable conditions, we have hundreds of ready-made wildlife passages. They just need to open them. And then secondly, the wall doesn't last very long because of how intense the landscape is. And they have to spend 50% of the cost to build it is spent again to maintain it. So $300 million to build across the San Rafael Valley. That's $150 million more to maintain that wall across the next 2 to 3 decades. If they ever run out of money, which maybe they will, and they don't maintain it, there will be pieces of the wall that fall down. So that, I think if we keep that in mind, the gates are their first solution. But that's a great question.
Eamon, thank you so much. That was great. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, and we're going to keep the theme moving here, staying within the same geography, but we're joined online by Zach Palma, also from the Sky Island Alliance. And Zach is going to be talking about grassland restoration in Mexico. Zach, can we do a sound check with you to make sure we're hearing you, you're hearing us?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everyone.
Okay.
Buenos dias.
Loud and clear. It's all yours.
Awesome. Wow, I love listening to Eamon, my colleague. I think that is a great presentation to kind of shift our geography south and what I will be talking about. So my name is Zach Palma. I'm the program director for the south region of the Sky Islands, which we can interpret as Sonora, Mexico, mostly. Let me share my screen real quick. All right, everybody seeing what we got going on here?
We see you.
Wonderful. So today I want to talk a little bit about our work on the south part of the border. I know we're here in celebration of what the Santa Cruz River is. And what I really want to dive into and hopefully share and even maybe spark inspiration is a bit of the approach that we are tackling and shooting for within this portion of the watershed. So as opposed to really throwing a lot of science and backing the reasons why we're doing things, I want to kind of blend a social approach to what we are rolling out through relationships with rural communities in the Santa Cruz river valley, but mainly the grasslands habitat of northern northeastern Sonora. So grasslands as a biome, I think it's important to understand this connectivity. Eamon gave us a really awesome idea of how important connectivity is, and that can vary by habitat, by ecological regions, by a million factors, un montón. But to understand our region that is incredibly biodiverse, you might have noted the passion in Eamon's voice, and I think a lot of us probably in this room share that for the Sky Islands region. Specifically, the borderlands section with our high elevation valleys is incredibly biodiverse. And in many ways that can be subtle to the eye right away. But this grasslands introduction into the middle grounds of the Sky Islands region is a big player in that role. And so I just want to set us in place where I'll be talking about today. I'm sure most folks are quite familiar with some of these maps. So where will I be talking about? ¿Dónde estamos? Specifically, again, these high grassland valleys of the Madrean Sky Islands region. This is what we call our Madrean archipelago, our Sky Islands. As you can see to the northeast, we have our high elevation Colorado Plateau, and to the southeast, within Mexico, the Sierra Madre. And so again, as I mentioned, we're really focusing on this central borderlands area, which includes a bit of the Boot Heel, a little bit of Chihuahua, but mostly southeastern Arizona and northeastern Sonora. This area has kind of two central grasslands area. One that we'll be talking about a lot today, which will be the western portion. But it is important to acknowledge that the Four Corners area of Arizona, New Mexico, Sonora, Chihuahua is also a prime grasslands area. And so again, we'll be focusing on this western piece because that is a lot of the work that Sky and Alliance is really focusing its energy on within the past 5 years. And that is excitingly expanding much more into the Santa Cruz watershed. And so just really putting us in place. I'm sure most folks are familiar with these maps. This area is what I like to call, and not just myself, I think someone from Watershed Management Group, Joaquin Murrieta, may have coined this, but the fábricas de agua, or the water factories. This is where a lot of our rivers in this region start. We're looking at the upper watersheds, the Rio San Pedro, we have the Santa Cruz, as well as the Rio Sonora, all of them flowing in their respective areas and feeding very large areas of our beautiful region. And so again, bringing us to place, this is where we've been really focusing our efforts with, we can generally call it watershed restoration and management, but really focusing in on these mid-level elevations, even to the lower elevation, even though we're in the upper watershed, what we would consider our valleys and a lot of these grassland habitats. In this map, you can see a black polygon lines the Sonoran grasslands conservation priority area. That is a lot of where we've aligned our work. But as you can see, there's different ejidos, which designate some of the areas and relationships we've been working. And so the two green ones, Naco and Ejido Zapata, Emiliano Zapata, are where we are really working a lot on an ejido-wide approach. But a lot of these ejidos we're working with individual ejidetarios, which you can basically relate to as a private ranch. And for folks who might not be familiar with what an ejido is, I really appreciated, I believe it's Carol's historic talk earlier, and really diving into the history of this landscape, because that is very important to understand where and how we got to where we are now, but also how do we meet our objectives? How do we roll out conservation, restoration, what have you, without truly knowing the social and historical landscape? And so ejidos are basically a byproduct of the Mexican Revolution. And as Carol mentioned, William Green, the cattle company, owned a lot of our watershed lands in this area, not just the Santa Cruz, but as well as the San Pedro River Valley. Short story, the revolution happened, what they call the Reforma followed, basically redistributing land from the rich hacienda system and creating ejidos, which within the United States, one might understand through a zonification process of communal land. And that means essentially this is communal rangeland management. Over the past few decades, some of these have turned more individual and each ranch operates on its own, but there are elements of communal management left over. And in some cases, these ejidos completely manage all of their lands together. And so what I really want to dive into now in this short amount of time is what that opportunity means for landscape conservation, but as well as for a restoration effort if we understand that many parts of our watersheds are degraded, some are in great condition and others not. And how do we adapt with a changing climate and other very challenging factors, as Eamon mentioned, by living in a binational borderlands area. So what we basically did, I should say, or still do, is wrapped this conservation approach into what we call our Ranchos Regenerativos program. And that embarks all of our work to meet our landscape conservation goals within a cultural and social context of rangeland management, of traditional lifestyles in rural communities on this landscape. So a lot of this is going to be familiar for a lot of you, I would imagine. This is looking at land tenure and looking at how do we get permission to do restoration activities, as we might do in public lands as well. That is the access, that is the permission, but also the collaboration of how to implement essentially low-tech process-based restoration activities. So erosion is top of the list, as you can imagine. A lot of rock structures, revegetation, as well as reseeding. And on the image to the right, this might not be considered low tech, but contour swales and berms are a part of this strategy, if you will. And this has a history in the region invested in by the Mexican government as well. And so these are very, in some ways, easily approachable activities to do with ranchers. The question that is proposed is, what are these actions that can immediately be done? We're not talking about rangeland management yet at this point. We're not talking about changing how one should manage the cattle, the business on the landscape, but we're focusing in on what is the land telling us, how is the water moving, and how can this be improved? How can we develop a further relationship with this? As folks have been living on these landscapes for generations, to improve ecological functions, improve habitat, and of course the connecting piece with cattle ranching is to increase forage amount productivity for a ranch. And I'll continue to talk about this, but I would like to acknowledge that there are complications with our conservation priorities, and I would even say culture from a Western science point of view, as well as rural communities and production through extraction on the landscape. And what I'm saying by this is some of the traumas that and the conflicts that can come out of cattle ranching and landscape health. And so this is something that we navigate with this program, and possibly this might be causing some hard feelings, even seeing a logo like regenerative ranching under a conservation organization. And I think it's important to name that, because as I will finish this presentation, one of the most important priorities of this work is collaboration. We do not meet our conservation goals by lumping people into categories and pointing fingers and blaming. This is a social effort. And very specifically in Sonora, in Mexico, this is how we see as Sky Alliance the culturally appropriate way to meeting our goals in collaboration, co-designing with our neighbors, with the very people that live on these landscapes. And so, as I mentioned, direct activities that might not affect ranch decisions. We also are investing in elevating the decision-making processes on ranches. As we know, much of our landscapes have been impacted by overgrazing. Cattle are not native to this landscape, although areas of this landscape have evolved with hooved herbivores grazing. Cattle were brought by the Spanish and became quite prolific within the first couple hundred years of colonialism and settlement by the Spanish within our region. This landscape reflects some of their native landscapes within Africa. And I think there's some reasons why cattle can be done sustainably, or that at least the concept is that this is good ranch land. And I think that can be very easily reflected through some of the success that northeastern Mexico and much of northern Mexico sees with cattle production, quality, health factors, expenses input for producing cattle. This is not a talk about primarily cattle, though. So this concept, I think, is really important to understand is, how are we observing the landscape and making decisions collectively? The goal, of course, as rangeland managers, to make decisions based off of our observation of the habitat, of the ecological factors, of the climate on these landscapes. And what we do, our approach with Skyline Alliance, is to introduce easy, tangible activities that basically can be used as tools to not only mitigate or eliminate the impact of cattle, but to change stocking rates in some conditions, to change management strategies where the cattle can appropriately rest our landscapes, not impact high priority ecological areas, and also have some of that original footprint of a grazer, a large hooved herbivore grazing on this landscape. And so some of those quick activities are exclusion fencing. This is not new. This is done throughout the Southwest. Basically, we have high priority ecological areas, mostly associated with water. Let's throw some wildlife friendly fencing around it. Pretty easy concept for ranchers to get their mind around. If cattle need to drink, we can put a drinker in with wildlife ramps. But how do we keep our springs? How do we keep our riparian areas from drying out? Because once they dry out from loss of vegetation, from increased solar gain, from loss of shade, loss of organic material, the effort, the money, the resources to restore once wet habitats is immensely a large project. It may take many years. It may not even be successful. And so a very important part of this work with ranchers is to identify these areas. If they're in great condition, excellent. Let's continue to protect them. If they're in poor conditions, let's still protect them and then slowly restore them back. And to not dive super deep down this rabbit hole, I just want to mention the other piece that you can see in the bottom left corner is really entering the realm of rotation and stocking rates on ranches. We know the land needs to rest. That is how it has evolved, and that is primary need for the soil in grassland habitat. And so electric fencing is something we're starting to work with ranchers on for non-selective or intensive rotational grazing, where cattle will be on a small piece of landscape and ideally not come back to that landscape for 12 to 18 months to ensure resting. Whether we're in a drought year or not, that is absolutely imperative for the health of not just the grassland vegetation, but the whole entire ecosystem. So I just throw that last question in there. Again, bringing things back is, how are these approaches culturally and socially acceptable and usable as models? And so the last piece of this program, our regenerative ranching, is a lot of blending of giving value to mixed grassland habitats, pure grassland habitats, oak woodlands, etc. Many things that we see within the Santa Cruz watershed, as well as adjacent watersheds, is how can we understand further the biodiversity? How can we coexist with predators that might have a bad rap for depredation of calves? And how can we look at this landscape at a non or less extractive lens, but also bring economic security and livelihood to rural communities that have been affected negatively in many of the ups and downs and roller coasters of what the borderlands and even the impact of the US has on Mexican communities. And so this slide just shows a bit of different activities that we do, monitoring of wildlife. In some cases, ranches will get certification with the Mexican government for sustainable hunting. It's amazing what folks will pay for a Gold's turkey or different deer species to hunt, and how that can relate to how much time a cattle is on the land grazing. The far right photos are something that we've been working on in the San Pedro and now in the Santa Cruz River Valley, is native seeds production. There is not many places you can find native grass seed in this part of Mexico. In Chihuahua, you can purchase it. And as folks who are familiar with this market in Arizona, it's quite expensive. It's going up. Drought is not making this any better. And so the clarity of the need for native grass seed amongst other native plants and seeds has really been a focal point of working with ranches and ejidos to make that production and access to these plants accessible. If we can have abundance of these plants and seeds to inject into our restoration projects on these ranches, at the same time that ranchers can reduce stocking rates and thus being harvesting seeds amongst other products from the land that might be much less extractive. And so there's a lot packed into this slide. I really love talking about the excitement that alternative land uses can bring towards this area, but I'll leave it at a pretty simple question: is how can we change the narrative from extractive to regenerative? So how do we actually achieve success, right? We're very familiar with strategic planning and conservation goals based on watersheds, based on areas, based on collaboratives. All of these processes amongst the environmental community is not new. And we acknowledge that, and we put a very heavy paperweight on the together piece with rural communities that many times have been left out of these conversations, but are feeling the impacts of climate change, of border walls, of other negative impacts on our landscape. And so we've really put time in, and will continue to put time in, the trust and relationship building with rural communities, with ejidos, with individual ranch families, to co-design and co-implement this restorative regenerative process. Because more common than I would like to see, especially in Mexico, we get large mega projects that are funded for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. And the environmental crew comes in, they do their work, they interact with rural communities, and they're out. And I'm sure we've seen that model many times, and it doesn't necessarily produce behavior change. If we're really looking at cattle are not going to disappear overnight on this landscape, how can we achieve sustainable regenerative management together is the way, by trusting and working slowly but positively towards these goals. So bringing things back to Santa Cruz, because I know this is the research days, and it is such a magical place. And if you've never been into the southern aquifers, you can see on this map, but the big old U-bend, the Herradura, it equally is magical. And I would add to the social component of many of these communities, specifically thinking of Santa Cruz, the town, the ejido, have a long history of rural agriculture and traditional knowledge. And so I should check my time, but what I want to convey is the importance of this model and understanding that more than 80% of land use within the state of Sonora is dedicated to cattle ranching. And so if we're not working with the cattle sector, with the ranching sector, with the agriculture, how will we sustainably meet our conservation goals? So as a kind of a final note to wrap in here to really try to seal that concept of collaborative work within these rural communities, as a lot of times as ecologists within the environmental sector, nonprofit, government agencies, we have a pretty clear agenda. And many times that can be understood as deliverables, even in funded projects. You know, what are we trying to get out of this? And that is very important. But I don't want that to cover up the importance of what I am talking about here as the collaborative process. A lot of times that can be seen as a byproduct, but the consistent collaborative process, and this is what we're seeing after 5 years of work, brings an exciting future of doors opening to conservation strategies, activities implemented on a cross-sector approach. And I think that word cross-sector is very important because, again, as environmental entities and institutions, we really focus on this and try to, you know, operate within a system that might be a bit challenging to truly achieve these goals. The more cross-sector work that we can, in this case, rural communities, rural agriculture, I truly believe, and at Skyline Alliance, that is the pathway for the conservation in these landscapes is through that collaborative, long-term approach. And this final image I put in here is, if anyone is familiar with permaculture philosophies and concepts, it really centers on an equal playing field, care for Earth, so everyone is here for, our environmental systems, but as well as people care, acknowledging that if we don't take care of our people, will we meet our environmental goals? I'll let everyone answer that question in their head. But the third part is fair share, which could be a little conflicting to think about what that means, especially within the society and the culture of the United States. But what I think that really gets at is fair share between the earth and the people, and acknowledging that these are landscapes, and acknowledging that humans must have a relationship with these landscapes to care about them, to steward them, and to further the longevity, the ecological functioning of these landscapes. And so I just want to share again that this is not Skyline Alliance, you know, taking all this credit, or we're doing everything. This is a network of social pieces moving to move forward with this work. And I didn't share much of actual numbers and what we're doing and how many ranches and specific project data. If that is of interest to anyone, I'm more than happy to talk about that and share those specifics. But really bringing this back, I hope this presentation has been insightful on the approach. And I know there's other presentations on the Mexican portion of this watershed, but I'm a firm believer, as being Mexican American myself, that a lot of times collaboration doesn't end at the border, that environmental conservation doesn't end at the border, but going back to Eamon's presentation and the metaphoric and the social realities that a border brings, it's challenging, and we have to be intentional about being a binational, united community and not let division cause its chaos amongst us. And so these are a mixture of funders that we work with, Mexican government, US government, even the United Nations Development Program, and of course with our amazing community partners and ranches. So I will leave that there. Gracias to everyone. I don't know if there's time for some questions.
Thank you,
or
Zach. That
comments.
was
Always
fantastic.
welcome.
Yeah, we appreciate it so much. So we are going into a break, but I want to make sure that there's an opportunity, if there's sort of a brief and impactful question that we can offer up to Zach in the room, that we share it. Otherwise, Zach, if you can stay on Zoom for a bit, if folks have questions, we can also file them up and try to connect with you directly through there. But that's the option that we're going to take, and we're very grateful for your time, very grateful for everybody on Zoom and in the room for joining us this morning. We'll be continuing to explore some of the margins of the Santa Cruz River. So first up, we're going to be talking about Oso Wash, which is a tributary to the Santa Cruz River. Then we're going to be moving into conversations around the inevitable flooding issues that come within any watershed, but where we could be turning those flood risks into opportunities in Ambos, Nogales. And then the third presentation, I'll be stepping in to give a presentation on trash and how we are working to analyze and share those data in a far broader reach than we have done in the past. Have I bought everybody enough time? A little more, all right. So we're going to start off with Alex Corral from Sonoran Institute. Alex is going to be talking about Oso Wash, where there are binational environmental challenges and shared solutions. Alex, you set? Come on up.
Thank you. Hello. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here today. I have to say something. I will be talking about Oso Wash, but we have here 3 experts that knows more than me. First one, Ben Lomelí, Claudia Hill, and Ernest. They have been working on this project during the last 6 years of their lives, and they put a lot of effort, a lot of attention of this. So if you have any question about this, please ask them, not to me. So I would like to start just, next one, please. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So I would like to start with a small story. This is the view of my house, of the backyard. And you know, one day I wake up and I saw a lot of trash through my window, and I say, who put all the trash there? So that Alex, conservationist, worry for, for the environment, say, I don't want to see all the time this trash in my window, because just I can't. So I took my car, I drove around my neighborhoods to be there in the point to take all the garbage. And when I started cleaning with the time, I found that there was islands of trash like this one all around over. The thing is, I only can see what I have in front of my window, and I cannot see the whole picture. And then I say, what I can do about this? And it's like, okay, I will be just cleaning what I have in front of my window and then see how I can support my community. So that day, I reborn in a conservationist person, not the day that I start working with Sonoran Institute, but that day, so this is the picture. So the garbage, then how I clean it, how I start, and then when I finish all the process. And then, like I say, I found more and more trash. So environmental issues are like that. They are there. They are not waiting for us. And if the community, if people around is not involved to resolve them, no one is going to do anything. So just keep that in mind. I think this is the most famous map of this day. So I think I don't need to explain too much about what is the Santa Cruz River Basin. So we're going to be talking about the Also Wash, which is a tributary of the Santa Cruz River. So the Also Wash area, it's over here. So if you talk with Ernest is going to say, it's not Also Wash, Alex, it's Brickwood Canyon. So for this conversation, we're talking about Also Wash, but some people know as well like a Brickwood Canyon. So it's the same thing. So all the area of the Brickwood Canyon Also Wash is around 10.5 square miles. And like you see, start here in Nogales, in the neighborhoods, Puerto de Anza, Lomas de Anza, and other neighborhoods around. And all that flow, it's coming from 2 wastewater treatment plants. So the flow is going there, then cross the border, and then is connected with the Santa Cruz River. So this is the map. This is a view of all the wastewater treatment plants in the area. We have Los Alisos, Lomas de Anza, Puerto de Anza, and the Nogales International Wastewater Treatment Plant. So this is a small area that I just showed you about the Also Wash. And this flow is coming from the rainfall the most of the time. When it's raining, we have huge flows crossing the border. But usually in permanent, we have the water, the treated water that is flowing from Lomas and Puerto de Anza, and is like around 19 gallons per second usually, according with what IMA and Sonoran Institute is studying. I mean, this is the capacity, but it's not all the water that is crossing the border. I think it's around 10 gallons per second that is crossing the flows of the border. So just to understand more, usually we have in mind that the rivers are traveling or commuting from the north to the south, but remember that the Santa Cruz River is one of the rivers that is coming from the south to the north. So Lomas de Anza, then we have this travel all this way, like 1.5 miles from this point to the border, and then crossing to the Brickwood Canyon area. So to explain more about how these wastewater treatment plants are working right now, it's like we have a couple of neighborhoods, that Lomas del Sol and Lomas de Anza, that all the water that those neighborhoods use, the wastewater is sent to Lomas de Anza. So like this is in a small plant, some water, it's coming here, it's been treated and then released to the Also Wash. But like this plant is so small, is receiving more wastewater than the capacity of this plant. So the rest of the water is sent to Puerto de Anza. And Puerto de Anza is treating the wastewater from 3 neighborhoods, plus the water that is not treating from Lomas de Anza. And then release of this treated water to the river, to the wash. And the water that the wastewater treatment plant is not treating is just released, we can say, toilet to the wash, to the Also Wash. But then this not treated water is mixing with the treated water. And then this is the water that is traveling, commuting to the US. So let me try to explain. We have the pictures of both plants working. So Lomas de Anza is receiving 10.7 gallons per second. The design capacity is 7.83. So, but the capacity, what the plant has right now, it's only 5.28 gallons per second. So what happened with the rest of the water? Like I say, the rest of the water is conveyed with the pipeline to the Puerto de Anza. And then Puerto de Anza, he's receiving 8.44 gallons per second, lower than the capacity that was assigned, and just is treating 7.4. So remember, the rest of the water is standing here, and then this plant is just treating this, so you know what happened with the rest of the water. So the water that Puerto de Anza is treating is released, like I said, to the toilet, to the wash. And then the treated water from Puerto de Anza merge in this point with the wastewater. And that water is what is traveling and commuting to the US. Not everything it's bad. So we have this flow. This flow was from the last year, I think February from the last year, more than a year. And then this is a picture from the merge point with the Santa Cruz River and the also wash. You can see it's beautiful out there. Mac is here. Mac's it's a landlord of the area, and he can talk more about how beautiful is there. So, but not everything is bad. So all these issues start in 2019, at the end of 2019, and by the, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, and by the beginning of 2020, so the issues start to be coming, and ADQ start tracking the problem. ABWC, Friends of the Santa Cruz River were involved immediately. And so all the people were like, we have an issues here. This plan, Puerto de Anza, at least the last one, was built in 2018. So 2 years after these plans were built, start failing. So with all this year, like I say, with all our partners, stakeholders, community involved, the government for sure, ADQ, the state government, you know, all the players pushing through finding solutions, things are happening. And thanks to that pushing that all together we're doing, the federal government, the Mexican federal government is investing to develop a second wastewater treatment plant with more capacity that will be called Puerto de Anza 2, which will be on the side of the Puerto de Anza number 1. And they are still thinking about repair, maintenance, upgrades of the plans that they have right now and thinking to develop these second plans. So the federal government is investing around $44.5 million to different projects around Nogales. That include creating a wetland after these plants work. And another upgrades around the city infrastructure, you know, to improve what is happening in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. And other thing that is happening is Santa Cruz County, ADQ, are looking for create a wetland treatment area that could be developed hopefully in the future. And that's a nature-based solution that they are looking for. And I really believe that kind of solution should be, doesn't matter what happened in the Mexican side. Friends of Santa Cruz River, ADQ, they are pushing too, and they are making some and taking some samples in the river. I think they canceled the last one because the water quality there was just so bad. A lot of E. coli for winter. Now you know why it's a lot of E. coli there. And so they canceled the last tracking sample, but I hope that could be continued and Sonoran Institute would like to be there. And of course, Sonoran Institute is working in some samples about macroinvertebrate. Claire Tugmeyers is leading this project with Scully and other members. Thanks to so much, Claire. And thanks for Mag and all the landlord, the owners' properties there for allowed to Sonoran Institute to work there. So everyone is pushing, everyone is doing something. And I'm so happy to be part of this project. And like I say, if you have any question, ask Claudia, Ernest, or Ben. Thank you so much.
Nice job, Alex. All right. Any questions in the room about Oso wash, wastewater treatment, etc.? Josefina, absolutely.
Gracias, buenos días. Can we hear from Senor Mac about the land?
Thank you, Josefina. I just want to really appreciate Alex and Luke and Claire and Michael Bogan, everybody that puts on this conference, the Sonoran Institute. The great thing about effluent, it's awful, but if you treat it, it's the only growing source of water. So hopefully we'll get there someday. So, and it'll be a benefit to all of the Santa Cruz River if we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac.
Yeah, they're making a lot of advancements in water treatment. Do you think will there be a time when this water treatment will be reused in Mexico? Will it continue to flow across to support a wetland or into the Santa Cruz River?
Well, we hear about the Mexican government had the idea to reuse some of the water or looking that the wastewater from the city, make some research. Make research the basin areas there. There is another person here, Dr. Elia Tapia, that could talk more about basins research in the transboundary basins. But I think the international agreement to send the water to the International Wastewater Treatment Plant was because it's a benefit from both sides. And I think that's the idea is that the Mexican government don't want to pay more for treat the water, but I don't think they are going to change that releasing water to the Oso wash, for example. I think the Oso wash is going to be having more and more flows in the future, representing more important influence and flows from the Santa Cruz River. So I don't think that's going to change. The thing is, if the Mexican government has to pay for trade that water in the U.S., that's going to be another story. So, but I think the Oso wash is going to be an example that more and more flow crossing and benefit both sides of the border.
Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Oso wash is certainly a microcosm of the larger cross-border, cross-boundary flows, which is part of the reason, and it was approachable. It's a much smaller system. So it gives some justification for larger cross-border initiatives, which already appear to be underway. To speak more on that, we have Dr. Elia Tapia from the University of Arizona and Universidad de Sonora, who will be speaking on flood risk to water opportunity, building resilience in Ambos, Nogales. Welcome.
Hello, hello. Working well. Okay, perfect. So hello, everyone. My name is Elia Tapia from the University of Arizona Water Resources Research Center, and I will be talking today about a water resiliency project that was developed in the city of Nogales, Sonora by Universidad de Sonora. Oh, no. Oh, okay. Okay, so the project was developed by Universidad de Sonora, thank you to the support of the Sonoran Institute and the Lincoln Institute for Land and Water Policy through a Growing Water Smart grant. I was part of Universidad de Sonora when the project was awarded and progressed. And by the time when we were completing the project, I switched my organization to the University of Arizona. So my voice today is the voice of my Unison colleagues, Universidad de Sonora colleagues, that work on this project and put a lot of effort in trying to propose some measures for the city of Nogales, Sonora. My voice here is the voice of Jocelyn Heredia, Tadeo Tapia, Marina Gutierrez, Karen Burciaga, and Ismael Minjares. So I wanted to mention that. Also, I must say that I have been following up the presentations of this Santa Cruz River Research Days, and I couldn't help by worrying. I was worried because my presentation was more about the built environment and less about restoration and less about wildlife. So I was seeing all the presentation and I was like, oh, my presentation is gonna be different. My presentation is gonna be different. And then I was like, I hope they like them. And then I was like, okay, we're gonna do this, so let's do it well. At the end of the day, yesterday, I understood that the Santa Cruz is a binational river that belongs to a binational basin, also to a binational aquifer. So we basically share surface water, we share groundwater, we share people, we share wildlife, but we can also share opportunities. So this is exactly what this presentation is going to be about. We're going to be talking about we're going to be moving from flood risk to water opportunity in order to build resilience in Ambos Nogales. As I mentioned this, the project was awarded in February 2025, and the main objective of this project was to develop a disaster risk management plan for El Ensueño Transboundary Watershed in Nogales, Sonora, by assessing the flood risk and identifying feasible mitigation measures that can strengthen water resiliency and community well-being. So this project was born after a workshop that was held in 2024. This Growing Water Smart workshop, Nogales Growing Water Smart workshop. Those were amazing 2 days that we spent with the Sonoran Institute and the Lincoln Institute of Land and Water Policy. And there were a lot of participants there from different organizations, from different agencies. We had community members, we had different schools, and we basically sat for 2 days to talk about the challenge that are currently being experienced by the area of Ambos Nogales. So we brainstorm a lot of different options, but by the end of the day, two important challenges were emphasized. The first one was water availability, water for people, water for the environment. And then the second one was the floating. It's like there's always this constant feeling that water is not enough, that water is needed for people in order to live. Sometimes they have tandeos in the city of Nogales, Sonora, where they would close the water faucet, let's say that way, for let's say 4 hours, and there's this feeling of there's not enough water. But also every summer, when you hear the news about the Nogales, when you hear about the first rains of the season, there's always, and I don't like to say this out loud, but you will always find in the newspaper something terrible about a specific flood in specific Nogales area. It's like someone loses their car, houses are being destroyed, and people, they're also like losing their lives. So with this project, we were trying to address both issues, flooding and also water availability. So this is the main outline, the topics that we will be covering. So I'm going to talk about flood hazard. I'm going to talk about expected annual losses. I'm going to talk about flood mitigation measures, and then I end up with a disaster risk management plan that helps prevent floods, but also helps with the water availability problems that exist in the city. So this is the study area. The study area, as I mentioned before, is the city of Nogales, Sonora. It's a transboundary basin that belongs to the transboundary Santa Cruz River. And yes, we share water resources, we share opportunities as well. So this is the flood risk assessment that took place. So we wanted to know what was the current situation regarding floods in Nogales, like what's happening right now, what happens every year. Then we also wanted to understand what could happen if I start working or if I start developing mitigation measures in order to address flooding. What happens that if I start building like rainwater infrastructure? What happens if I start doing like rainwater harvesting in different areas? So we tested different scenarios. We determined the risk, and then we determined the expected annual losses. Bear with me, a lot of technical terms, and I apologize for that. So first of all, a flood hazard refers to the potential occurrence of flooding in a specific area, including the extent, the depth, the duration, velocity, and frequency. It describes the physical threat posed by flood waters before considering vulnerability of people, infrastructure, and assets. So what we did is to model flooding using a 2D model, a 2D hydraulic model that's called Flow 2D that told us the extent of the flow, the velocity, and also the flood depth depending on different return periods. So this is the information that the model needs in order to run. So we gave it like the study area, we gave it information about the topography, we gave information about the type of soil, because water flows different if it's just flowing through the city or if it's flowing through like green areas. So all that information, we added that information to the program. We added information about precipitation. We added information, what we did is to analyze like what was the maximum precipitation per year for the historic period of 1980 to 2025. And we calculated what is known as return periods. So that's the average time that must elapse for an event of a certain magnitude greater to occur. So when you see hydraulic models, they often associate the results to a probability of the event to happen. So everything that I present, it's associated to a probability. So that's what you need to remember when I start presenting you my different maps. So we have the something that we also did is to determine the household asset values. So yes, I want to test my measures, but I also want to test if they work. And the only way in which I can understand if they work or not is to try to see or try to determine the actual losses to the household. So we have 4 different types of households: very modest home with bare essential, low-level housing with bare essentials and basic appliances. We also had mid-range housing with basic appliances and furniture, and then the high-end homes with more abundant and higher value. So we had 4 types of household with values associated for the different assets that they have. So that helps us to determine the expected annual losses. They were estimated by intersecting the flow depth with the household asset values and applying vulnerability functions to estimate damage ranges. So we have different functions, and depending on the depth of the flood that we have, and depending on the value of the household, that's the way in which we were calculating the actual, the expected annual loss. So, yeah, that was a technical part. I can breathe now. I can breathe now. We went through the hazard risk and vulnerability and expected annual losses section of the presentation. So now I'm moving to the flood mitigation measures. So we started by analyzing what they're doing in other places in order to mitigate flood. So we used this Pima County Flood Control District manual. It was super nice because it had all the different measures. It even had like the cost. It had options for when would it be good to apply them. So we use this document as the base to try to find suitable areas for low impact developments. So we review this guidance. We also try to search for the right places, and we use this document from Lara Valencia because he's been working for way too long in the area, and he has these guidelines as well that said where, like the places where it would be better to apply this type of infrastructure, and then we prioritize them according to the characteristics of the area. So this is our micro basing, and these are the areas that we found to be suitable for applying this type of measures. These measures are the low impact development. The selected measures were storm water harvesting basin, also bioretention basin. We also found out that these sunny balls, which are rock infrastructure that dissipates energy, that they work well in the area. We have traffic circle planting, one rock dam, and check dam. So those were the measures that we selected. Here are some examples of the areas. Another measure that we proposed was rainwater harvesting system, and we propose these specific areas to apply them. And we also calculated like how much water we could be saving. So we are saving a lot of things. We're saving water, we are saving life, and we're also saving money because we're preventing damage from happening. We also have the Gavion Dam as a proposed measure. We have it here. This was actually like the location of the gabion and the specifics of the gabion. It was provided by the Municipal Institute of Planning of Nogales. So we also came up with a budget of how much we need to spend in order to apply this option, which is around $2.5 million US. And then we tested different scenarios. So this is the flood hazard with a 10-year return period. This means that there's a 10% chance of occurring in a given year. We have different modeling maps for the different options. Like we have the baseline option, low impact development, the rooftop rainwater harvesting, Gavion Dam, and then the three options all together. So this is the flooded area. And in all the options, like every time we applied a measure, we would see how the area of flood, it would decrease. So this happened in all of our scenarios. So when you apply this type of measures, you can see it in space and you can count it, you can count the pixel, and every time you do that, you get less floating. So this is the floating map, and then we have the expected annual economic losses. So we move, let's say, the baseline for a 10-year return period, 10% of chance of occurring in a given year. We started with 2 million pesos with the baseline. Then if we applied low impact development, 1.3 million pesos. Rainwater harvesting, we moved to saving 500, or the expected losses are around 500,000 pesos. Gavion Dam, sometimes it wasn't working that way. It's not that it works better or not. The Gavion Dam, it stops the flow of water, so you get the same water, but it's moving slowly. So sometimes Gavion would lead us to different type of numbers, but we are seeing a reduction in losses. We are seeing a reduction in the area of floating, and also we are saving water. So this project, I think it's important to share, because you actually get to see the numbers of everything you are trying to work for. With this project, I can tell you that you can save money, you can save water, you can save life, and the only thing that you have to do is to plan for the future. So some of the benefits, well, you have improved environmental quality, reduce urban heat. You also strengthen community engagement, education and recreational benefits. You have an enhanced water quality, protection of infrastructure, increased urban biodiversity, and you have water savings through rainwater reuse and aquifer recharge. So this is an image that represents the disaster risk management plan. So we have the different measures, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. We propose to start with the Gavion development, with the Gavion Dam as a priority structural measure, and then start completing regulatory and institutional actions needed to enable the low-impact developments and rainwater harvesting. Then we move to expand rooftop rainwater harvesting, and then adding the low impact development measures. And then we consolidate a green infrastructure network that integrates all these measures. So I would like to finish by saying that results of this study, they show that flood risk reduction can serve as a pathway to strengthen hazard mitigation, water resilience, urban planning, and community well-being in Ambos, Nogales. So thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful. You did it. Perfectly timed, too. Questions?
Thank you. You showed some real positive results with low impact development and water harvesting. Did you evaluate any larger scale detention or retention facilities?
No, the largest retention facility we can say that is the Gavian Dam that we have, but no, it's a really small watershed that served mostly as a pilot example, as a pilot exercise of what is that could be done in the whole city. So yeah, it's small, but you have the maps, you have the numbers and statistics. Mm-hmm.
We have time for one more. Excellent. So these are published, soon to be published, available?
Oh, so you have it. Now, the Sonoran Institute has the report, and I think it's worth thinking about sharing these results because we want them to be applied. Like, that's the whole purpose. And I believe that is written in the report. Like, we want this to be used either as an example or to be used to actually go there and build the things that we are proposed to build. Mm-hmm.
That's it. Yeah, it's a justifier. It's excellent and well-researched. Thank you, Elia. Okay, so now I will be presenting in place of Kevin Robles from the University of Arizona. Kevin was going to be our presenter in Spanish, had a family emergency in Mexico, and had trouble getting a good solid Zoom connection. So I am going to do my level best to fill in for Kevin, who has been working toward what I see as the culmination of 5 years of research on trash in the Santa Cruz River. So Sonoran Institute initiated this research with support from Pima County Regional Flood Control District in the county's river management plan, which was completed in 2021-2022. And in that river management plan, stakeholders and the community collectively, almost unanimously said, we need to do something about all of the trash in the Santa Cruz River. So putting my, graduate school scientist hat back on for a second, came up with and modified some existing field protocols for doing real scientific assessments of trash. And to do that, I worked with the University of Arizona's Arizona Institute of Resilience, AIR, which has 2 amazing internship programs. One is Earth Grant, and the other one is the RISE program, both of which provide funding and then mentorship for these up-and-coming researchers to explore water harvesting, trash research, bird research, you name it. So if that is not a tool that you all as water practitioners are familiar with, you should get yourself familiar with it because it is an amazing opportunity for these students. So in the last few years, we've had students doing the research in the field to enumerate trash that is in the urban corridor of the Santa Cruz River. So that's looking from, let's say, like Silver Bell to Grant, sometimes up towards Ina Road, right? So we're really looking like downtown Tucson. And the research questions we were trying to ask, oh, I meant to start my timer. The research questions we were trying to ask, I'll make it down to 10 minutes now, were what type of trash is there? Where is it located? What does it weigh? And are there any sort of contributing factors like vegetation? Is the water flowing? Things like that. And it's a pencil and paper survey. And we've got, at this point, hundreds of these big, what's the format? Like, let's say 10 by 20, double-sided, field notebook data sets that we have diligently been entering into everybody's favorite program, Microsoft Excel, which can, at this point, barely handle it. So, as we had presented last year, and again this year in the work that Kevin has been doing, Kevin and Jacob, who presented last year, have been taking my huge Excel spreadsheet, the type that probably added an extra year to my graduate degree because I couldn't analyze anything, and have been turning it into a usable tool, a easy entry, easy, if not automatic analysis of these data. So let's take a look at this. So it's allowing you to ask questions like this. How much trash was collected during the first 4 months of 2022? To do this in Excel, working with dates in Excel, what a nightmare. So now automatically, this tool, which is going to be hosted online, accessible to all, allows you to start to query it and get quick, easy results. In this case, temporal results that demonstrate all of the trash that was collected during the research portion of this study in the first half of 2024. And then it also allows us to start to track this month by month. Sonoran Institute is not the only entity that's out there collecting trash. Hardly are we the only entity out there collecting trash. There are neighborhood groups and organized days of connection, other research initiatives. Pima County wastewater itself does a huge cleanup every March. So we are starting to collect those data so that we can get a better understanding of when and where trash is collected so that we can build in, subsequent analyses. This matters because we are in and are stewarding an ancient river system that has sustained people for well over 12,000 years. And we made massive investments in water quality and wastewater treatment at least here in Tucson, in the Agua Nueva and Tres Rios treatment plants, right? So with all of that investment, with all of that energy, we have a ever improved river system that's full of trash, right? It really makes it hard to tell this success story when there's a million styrofoam cups everywhere you go, right? So let's do some research so that we can put some numbers behind that, which will help us have a much more robust system that allows for larger restoration and rehabilitation. So this is kind of what I just walked through a little bit before. We kind of went from paper forms, right? The Excel locally saved file, additional research, the manual labor here being trying to run, Excel analyses across multiple tabs. It doesn't work. And now we are getting to a point where we're trying to create this active, live, interactive database that will be far more transparent, far more accessible, not only for adding in data, but then for analyzing those at the community scale. And it provides for far easier support. So way fewer manual steps, way fewer opportunities for 1 point in a decimal degree to say that the trash that was collected at St. Mary's Road was collected in the middle of a neighborhood in Riverview, right? These things need to be accurate, and taking away all of these manual entry steps, or minimizing them at least, will get us to a point where we have a far more resilient data set. So one of the other things that this does is it will, it's now available in Spanish and in English, which is huge. And this is something that Kevin took on completely on their own. I did not prompt to do this in Spanish. But Kevin has made this available now in Spanish and in English, where we can automatically rank categories of trash that we are seeing in the river. Again, to do this in Excel, like, are you kidding me? And now it's a choice. And I should say we modeled this off of the USGS stream gauge interface, right? Where you can just go through there. What do you want? What dates do you want? What are we talking about? But ultimately what we're seeing here is a preponderance of trash in the form of food packaging, right? Right? Then we have, it's largely food packaging, some clothes, a lot of miscellaneous things. This river is a huge, it receives water from a huge catchment. So there's all sorts of things. Even though we have 56 different categories of trash in our study, we still have a large amount of miscellaneous trash in there. Again, here, this is sort of a zoomed in version of it. Within each of these as well, I should note that there are more than one subcategory. So here within like food packaging, that includes styrofoam cups, plastic cups, paper cups, you know, it's everything. And some of these are a little bit farther broken down, but you can sort of see how this is structured. We've done this with counts of trash, but also associated weights of trash, which answer two different management type questions. And again, this gives us that ability to sort of track trash month over month. Here's the thing, we're not doing this in the summertime, but a lot of trash is getting mobilized in the summertime. So by distributing this effort to the community, there will be community members and our community members who are picking up trash throughout the summer. So it should give us a far clearer assessment of trash mobility and accumulation throughout the year beyond what we have now. Also, okay, we know all these, we have 56 different categories of trash. We can also start thinking policy with those. How much of that trash is recyclable? And when it's recyclable, we can do different things with that trash stream, potentially when we're doing big river cleanups, for example. Some of that trash could be pulled off and put back into the recycling train, with the minority of it then going towards landfills. And it's this composition analysis, it's this ability to share and show these data more easily, more widespread, and more accessibly that is at the heart of what we're trying to do with this project. And it functions similarly on the, not just on the graphic, but in the text-based presentation as well. For every, and again, this is where Kevin just went way beyond what the job was, but for every one of these analyses, you're also, visual analyses, graphical analyses, you're also getting these text-based results as well. And we're really happy to be able to share something like this. And then, you know, we can also ask questions about floatability, right? When trash floats, you can have different means to interfere and intercept that trash than if it's heavy sinking trash, right? So it's in here where we're able to take a look at floatability and see that, and this is a subset of the data, I know, but about at least half of the trash is floatable. Okay, so when the water's flowing, you could skim that trash off the surface. And that's what's given us the justification to install some passive trash collectors. We've installed 3 of them now in drainages to the Santa Cruz River here, 2 in Tucson and 1 down in Nogales, right? We could not have justified that with a funder had we not had, at the time, big heavy Excel analyses. Now it's truly a click of the button, a click of the mouse. Also questions about recyclability. And you can repeat this assessment based on location, right? We have different reaches of the river where we can group these data. You can do it for specific washes. There's a lot of opportunity that we have here to explore these subtypes around human health, for example, right? We do see a lot of PPE still in the river. And we started this during COVID. I would love to know how many face masks and rubber gloves and things like that were in the river prior to 2020. But at least now we have a good sense of what sort of paraphernalia we're dealing with. There we go. Thank you, 5. right? So we're sort of like looping around to show some of the variability that are in there, but this is all just to say that this tool will give you the ability to focus perhaps on where you would have the most effective trash cleanup. We have a couple of sites that we always go to because they're always trashy. That was sort of an empirical way for us to, or predictive way for us to figure out and be responsive to the trash that we were seeing. But now we can get more and better coverage of trash as the data entry portal becomes more accessible to people. We can start to design those interventions like trash traps and give us some sense of impact as it relates to public health. All of these things go beyond Sonoran Institute. This is something that Sonoran Institute created and is very happy to share, and we hope that our partners will use this interface to justify other interventions, whether they are additional trash capture devices, river cleanups, any sort of policy or engineering strategy that can help knock this trash blight back to keep us in a forward direction to allow the Santa Cruz River to be the Santa Cruz River and not just ultimately a trash bin for the city's diffuse trash that just gets scattered all around. So, you know, ultimately what I want to recognize here is the work that Kevin did. And Kevin, at my pressing, I was like, put what you did in here, like give yourself some kudos here. So he really took this very cumbersome record keeping system and has turned it into the old one is so like Old Testament now, like it, you know what I mean? Like this new one is like crisp, clear, quality assurance and quality control are built into it. It's available to all, or soon will be available to all. He made the whole thing available in English and in Spanish. Like this thing is really massive, and I think it's going to be a really transformational tool for the community and really gives us this foundation to envision what the Santa Cruz River can look like trash-free. Also, it's not bound to any particular geography. This is also what we're hoping. So like we could use this throughout southern Arizona. We can use this in northern Sonora to get a better sense of what the trash problems are. It's very adaptable. And where we can do these analyses, all the better. So with this, you can scan this QR code, which I think will turn you into the login for the tool. If somebody can give me a qualifier on that. But again, acknowledgements here to RISE within the University of Arizona. They're really a tremendous organization. I would say thousands of volunteers who have come out to try to clean up the Santa Cruz River, who are actively, not trying, who are cleaning up the Santa Cruz River. And the many funders and the folks within Sonoran Institute beyond just the Santa Cruz River program who help make these volunteer and internship opportunities a reality. Where does the QR code take you? Yeah, it takes you to the tool? Okay, excellent. So you can create yourself a little, a quick account. There are no real data collection things in here. It'll just give you the chance to play with this tool at some point in the language of your choosing. So thank you all very much. I can take a few questions.
Hi, so me and Dan, mostly Dan, do trash pickup in a strip of the wash that I think would go to the Rito. So we know that there's a lot of styrofoam glasses from like Quick Trip and Circle K. And I'm wondering if there's any count on that and if you could use it to have them pay for some of the cleanups.
Yes, comma, maybe. So there are, because of the universal nature of, we know the 3 types of styrofoam cups we're seeing in the river. I don't think anybody else could call out a Tucson-specific type of trash that we see in the river, right? So we do have a specific count on QT. We do have a specific count on Polar Pop cups. We are hopeful that these corporate partners, a lot of the work that's been done has been corporate supported. The trash traps that we've installed have been corporate supported. So there is precedent for corporations to do the right thing where they should to try to remedy this significant problem of trash. And of course, we're being good scientists about it too. Hang on, okay. And then Kevin.
I'll be quick. I noticed one of the categories was hygiene, and my mind went all over the place on that one. Does that include like drug needles and dirty diapers?
Yes. So we have a, within hygiene, it includes toiletries, PPE, drug paraphernalia where we see it, and one more that I'm blanking on right now. Like diapers and things like that. Yes, I know. We don't see many dirty diapers, I gotta say. Thank goodness.
Seen a diaper.
Right?
I've never seen.
Am I understanding right that other organizations, people can contribute data to this?
That's the idea. We have not really road tested this yet. So you all are kind of the beta test group here. So if folks do want to try to enter some data, we'll know how to screen those data. So please do give it a try. And if there are issues, let me know and we can try to make some corrections.
You mentioned the trash traps that have been recently installed. I'm assuming you're collecting similar data on what they're capturing, and when do you anticipate that data being available?
We've got a decent amount. So the first trash trap that we installed was in Nogales in late 2024. And we've been, whenever we can get out there before the county does, which, like, thank you county for cleaning these trash traps out. But when we can get out there first, we do an upstream assessment, an in-trap assessment, and downstream assessment. So we know that these trash traps are removing between 65 and like 83% of the trash. And we saw floatables is about 50%. So they are overperforming on design. And those are just the small introductory model traps that we've installed so far. So yeah, we got some data to share. All right, last question here from Ernest. Chuck, I got you.
Thank you, Luke, for stepping in. My question to you is, we've had the trash trap down in Nogales for a couple of years now. Have you determined what data you're getting from that? Is it feasible? Is it worth it?
Yeah, it's worth it. It's overperforming, which is incredible. So they are blocking, happens to be a Circle K right upstream from where that one was installed. We are seeing a lot of trash scattered around the banks. We're also seeing a lot of that representative trash in the trash trap. We're also not seeing that trash downstream of the trash trap. So, and that's the intro model. You know, they have much bigger versions of these that have even higher efficacy and can do a bigger and better job at addressing the non-floatable trash. So that's what we did this pilot research to do. Hang on, we got Chuck right here, and then we can get somebody on. Yeah, we'll get it. Food's still coming in, so I'm buying time for the setup.
So, yeah, great data. And I wonder if you thought about any preventative approaches based on your data that could prevent the trash from getting in the first place, sort of an upstream solution.
So last year's team of interns looked up at, I want to say 12 of the contributing washes to the Santa Cruz in the downtown reach of the river. So they were trying to figure out ultimately what that contribution is, at least at the point where the wash or tributary hits the Santa Cruz. I've got to analyze those data, which will be a whole lot easier to analyze. But in having an assessment of what that trash looks like at the confluence, it will give us a better sense of what the contribution is in that sub-watershed that's draining in. So I'm hopeful that this time next year, we'll have a better sense of that. Go ahead, follow up. I'll repeat it for you. Okay. Yeah, so like looking beyond that immediate sub-watershed, could this start to address policy? Yeah, I mean, for sure. And some very bright graduate student or student at Pima Community College or the university could certainly make a run at that using these data, and we're really hopeful that that will be the case. Online.
Yes, our online question / suggestion is, could there be a possibility of connecting this database with Literati, which is an app for input of data?
Yes, I would very much like that. So Literati is this kind of AI like data entry app where you switch the app on and you just kind of walk along with your phone pointed at the ground. And it bing, 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 it picks up that trash and recognizes where it is. It geocodes it. It recognizes brands. I've been having some strikeouts in trying to coordinate this with the folks at Literati because I think that this is some significant ground truthing opportunity where we could continue our trash study as designed, pair it with the app in tandem to see that efficacy. And I'm curious to who that person was who asked the question. Thank you for it. All right, Jana. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so of the data reporting that's happening presently beyond what Sonoran Institute is doing immediately, Tucson Clean and Beautiful, for example, is collecting a lot of data. We share those data with Pima County because a lot of that work needs to be permitted. So Pima County is collecting that and aware of that. We share that in our Living River reporting every year. The plan will be, again, this is going to take some implementation time and maybe 10 minutes of free time to think about this, but to start to incorporate, yes, those larger distributed community collected data sets into this so that we can have a much more comprehensive picture of trash in the watershed. Thanks, and I'm glad you're doing that work. Thank you for that. All right, okay, yes, quick. Okay. Well, I think you're onto something. I mean, we're using an existing, sorry, that was a huge compliment. Just to make sure everybody in the room heard it and on Zoom. Yes, and it is a great tool. And the coding, the trash is a part of the coding, right? The data collection portal is really where it's at, and the display and analysis is really where it's at. So hopefully this cloud-hosted, student-built tool can get some backing behind it and some cloud stability behind it to ensure that we get more and more data entry. But yes, I would love to talk, I'll talk about trash with anybody, anytime.